Well, today marks the end of the financial year and the start of Labor's so-called cost of living relief with stage 3 tax cuts as the centrepiece. You know, the ones Labor promised that they wouldn't change, then did. Now, whatever the change, it won't go far in this climate. New data actually shows the number of New South Wales households forced onto hardship plans because they can't pay their energy bills has risen by 97% since the last federal election. That's the highest of any state. Meanwhile, inflation is now 4%, and that is even before these state and federal stimulus measures have come into force. Now, Labor has consistently assured us that their policy is airtight and will not drive inflation, not that Jim Chalmers is doing much to reassure us.
Well, we are confident but not complacent about inflation in our economy.
Let's bring in Judo Bank Chief Economic Advisor Warren Hogan now. Warren, thank you so much for joining us on the show this evening. We got these stage 3 tax cuts today, long awaited. Is this the right time, do you think, to be providing families with income tax cuts?
Well, thanks for having me on the show. Yeah, I think there's no better time to be getting tax cuts. And the reason I say that is not just because of how tough people are doing it out there, but our income tax take has got back to record levels, back to the levels we saw in the year 2000 when the GST was introduced. Now, the GST, 10%, was brought in. The trade-off was that we got a big tax cut, much bigger than anything we got today. But of course, the taxes have crept back up, particularly in the last few years on bracket creep. And we've now just got this really high personal income tax burden again. So I'm very in favour of tax cuts for that reason. The question is timing. You know, is this the right time? And of course, it's not, because we are trying to get this inflation down. We're trying to get rid of this cost of living crisis, and we're right on a knife edge. The economy has slowed for sure, but we're still creating jobs. There's still demand in the economy, and this will add to that demand and will potentially make the RBA's job harder. They're very resistant to raising interest rates, and if they keep resisting and then we end up with much worse inflation, not only is that making the cost of living crisis worse, but rates might have to go up a lot more next year. So it's not great timing. I think when the government was going through all of this earlier in the year, the economy looked on track, but right now it's actually looking like it's quite risky for them.
Which is a huge concern, and the government is adding cost of living measures, of course, on top of these tax cuts. Isn't that making it worse?
I think it is. And I think, again, at the beginning of the year when the budget was all framed up and they came to the decisions around the cost of living measures, I think they thought the economy was going to be a lot weaker than it's turned out to be. Things shifted a lot between basically February and the budget in May. That is, we got a lot more employment growth than we thought we were going to get. We've since known that the inflation's been stickier, higher, and not looking like it's going down. So it was a risky strategy, I think, in the first place, because there was no done deal that this economy was really weak and falling into a hole and that support was needed. But now it looks like it's sort of a little bit dangerous from an inflation point of view. Look, it's important that people get this support because it's horrendous what's happened in the last 3 years. People's standard of living has gone backwards big time. But the priority's got to be to get rid of the inflation. And I think this, and the states, the states really shouldn't be playing in this playground with providing cost of living measures, but they have, particularly in Queensland.
Queensland, exactly.
And yeah, look, it all remains to be seen, but if later in the year we've got an economy that's stubbornly sort of not getting rid of this inflation, or if inflation's picking up again, it'll be a disaster. Let's hope that's not the way it plays out. There's a lot of uncertainty around this, but yeah, it's a risky policy strategy.
So then why is the government doing this? Isn't it making it just so likely that the RBA will indeed hike rates in the near term?
Look, I think as I said, I think they thought it wasn't. I think they thought it was politically smart ahead of an election and that the economy would be soft and that everything was on track. And it sort of looked like that January, February, even early March, but things have changed. But look, we may end up getting some rate hikes, and I think most political analysts would say that's bad news for the government, for Albo. That remains to be seen. But we have to get rid of the inflation. That's the cost of living crisis, and it looks like these interest rates are not high enough to do that.
So when do you think, in the next?
Well, I think August, if they're not going to go in August, then maybe it's another 6 months away, or maybe we get out of this without a rate hike. It's no done deal, but August is certainly the absolute focus now. We're 4 weeks away, and it's the quarterly inflation number at the end of this month that'll determine that.
All right, all eyes on August then, but in the meantime, it's tough out there still. Warren Hogan, good to speak with you as always. Thank you so much for joining us on the show this evening.